We acknowledge the Yagara and Kaurna nations as traditional custodians of the land on which we work, live and learn, and their continuing connection with the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to them and their elders past and present.
All content related to this program is for general informational purposes only and contains stories and discussion around mental health that may be disturbing to some listeners. If you are concerned about yourself or someone you know, please seek professional and individual advice and support. More details are contained in our show notes.
My life is such a tiny blip in history. I don't want to waste it being consumed by MS and how this has negatively impacted my life.
That's resilience coach and author Teisha Rose, and this is Reframe of Mind.
The podcast that cuts through the platitudes and gets to the core of living authentically, challenging our assumptions and improving mental health with the guidance of good science, philosophy and learning from other people's lived experiences.
And we're your hosts, Louise and Andy Leroy. And in the last few episodes, we've been talking about the concept of reframing our experiences to help get through difficult situations and acknowledging that along the way, sometimes it takes more than just a change in perspective to get us through.
Professor Marie Thiessen, AC, Director for the Matilda Centre for Research in Mental Health and Substance Use, talked us through some strategies to help us identify when our mind might be playing tricks on us, stopping us from seeing when we're having a problem with alcohol, for example.
Yeah, we've been on a journey since the beginning of this series to find that authentic connection with our own emotions.
Yeah, what started as a quest for that magic ongoing state of happiness is now starting to look more like a standpoint that permanent happiness is something to be cautious of rather than aspire to.
Those calls of toxic positivity, count your blessings, good vibes only.
Or even someone else has got it worse than me.
Yeah, they suppress what we're actually feeling. So instead of releasing those feelings and then allowing the nicer ones to come back in, we end up winding our inner spring so tight that it eventually packs a real emotional punch when it unleashes all that pent-up energy.
Yeah, and while a change in perspective and approach might not be the only factor in overcoming something like an addiction, it can play a part.
It can also play a part when dealing with chronic illness.
Yeah, it won't cure the illness, but as this episode's guest points out, it can help to avoid defining ourselves by the illness we have.
Our guest today, Teisha Rose, had a life-changing diagnosis at the age of 22. After finishing university, she'd started a corporate career working in training and development, and then she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which sent her life in a completely different direction.
Yeah, her life became dominated by chronic illnesses for several years, and physically she was experiencing aggressive relapses as she hopped onto the medical roundabout of hospital stays and rehabilitation.
Teisha became frustrated by how her life had changed. She feared for a future and she knew something had to change.
So how did she change from being fearful about her future to being excited about it?
Teisha's book, Life Interrupted, tells her full story, and she took some time out from her day to have a chat to us about that journey. Could you give us kind of the abridged Cliff Notes version of what 15, 20 years of your life? It seems strange to whittle it down to a couple of sentences, but just like for people joining us on the journey right now, you were diagnosed with MS at 22.
Yeah, I was. So I was 22. I was living in the city of Melbourne. I'd just finished university, working at Telstra head office. So life was going perfectly to plan. And then I was diagnosed really out of the blue. I was never sick, and I all of a sudden was diagnosed with MS. And for a number of years, my health wasn't good. And by my health not being good, I was experiencing relapses. I won't go into all the scientific, I'm hopeless at explaining what MS is, but basically it's periods of dysfunction where my mobility was impacted. So it's a disease of the central nervous system. So I would find myself unable to walk. I was in wheelchairs, learning how to walk again. Sometimes I couldn't use my arms. Sometimes my vision was not good. And then I would recover, and then I would return back to my life as is. But it got to a point where I couldn't continue on with my life as it was. So I went back to university. I studied social work. I travelled. I lived over in Scotland for a year. Another time, to celebrate good health, I went over to Romania to actually volunteer with World Vision for a few months. So I had some significant changes, and they were all instigated by periods of poor health and just trying desperately to create a life where my health would improve.
I always think that when the people who've experienced the most trauma or pain or have experienced things like depression, anxiety, anything that is like that, are always the ones that want so much to be able to help others as well, to help other people from hopefully either out of that or not experiencing that. And that's what your story really resonates there with me, because I think you probably have seen a lot of darkness and you want to be able to help people through that, to know that there's something else at the end of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's such a sense of helplessness when you're stuck in a body that you can't move, or when you're in hospital alone at night, just scared of what your future will be, and just at an absolute loss as to how you can possibly move forward and whether you'll ever get better. And once you've experienced that, and once you've learnt and reflect on how you actually did manage to move forward, then you hope by sharing your story, but more importantly, your insights, that it will help others so they don't have to experience those really, really dark periods.
I suppose it's really useful sometimes just to start with some very basic understanding of who we are and what we do and that sort of thing. From your perspective with Life Interrupted, this is a very personal journey that you're actually expressing and sharing with everybody. So I'm just curious to begin with, what motivated you to make your personal journey an open book?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, for my friends that read my book, they were really surprised that I was so open, because my journey with MS has been really private, I guess. But I realised that I've learnt so much on this journey. I've had some incredible experiences that I want to share that with others. I really wanted to demonstrate that when life is interrupted, great things can still happen as you move forward.
It seems to be more focused on that moving forward as well, rather than dwelling on the negative things that can happen as a result of a chronic illness or disability. You seem to have found a way out of that.
Yeah, very much so. And I think I was really hesitant just to talk about myself and just to keep going over all the dark periods. And I really wanted to focus on the positives that came out of that and what you can do with those learnings to move forward. And I think too, as my background as a social worker as well, I was very aware that I'm not alone, that there's so many different challenges we all experience. And I wanted to share my learnings from my challenge to help others.
It's almost like as well, sometimes we hear things in popular culture, in things we read and things we see, where there's almost a superstition about talking about some of these sorts of things, like we're going to be attracting more of it. Did you have an inkling of that kind of fear while you were stepping into this journey?
I think it's all to do with timing. I think I wouldn't have been ready to do this in the first 10 years of living with MS, when I was going through really difficult times. My health wasn't good. I kept experiencing relapses, spent a lot of time in and out of hospital and rehab. I wasn't in the right space to share any learnings, but I think when I started reflecting back, sort of at the 10, 15 year mark, then I was in the right place and I wasn't concerned. I think I'd done so much work on myself at that time. I wasn't concerned about attracting the negative. I'd done a lot, and I'm a big believer in the laws of attraction and really focusing on the positives. And that's why I was really, I guess, motivated to focus on what I'd learnt so I could continue on with that.
So Teisha evaluated how she'd been treating herself and how she'd been ignoring what was really important to her in the goals that she was setting and the achievements she was making.
I was nearly killing myself MS-wise. I look back and smile at it now. I was scared of letting go a job training people in customer service, and I was compromising my health for that. And all these amazing things have happened since, but you're so caught up in that yeah, it's really difficult. And I reflected back years later thinking, why did I push myself so hard at uni? I always, if you had to get really good marks to get honours, I pushed and pushed and pushed myself to get those marks. And I thought, I don't even want to get into research. I don't need to do honours. But if it was there, I wanted to prove that I could do it. And I realised that I was looking externally for confirmation of my worth. And that was the same in jobs. And I thought, I need to look within. And so when I was doing jobs which wouldn't compromise my health but wouldn't challenge me, mentally, then I looked at other ways, and that's when I wrote my book. So I was getting frustrated that I couldn't work in positions that would show my full potential, and I thought, well, why not channel that? Work what I need to work to, get money in to survive, but then channel my creative energy and channel myself into doing something that I could do. And for me, that outlet was writing a book.
One of the things I think it was in an interview that I saw you do, you said was that you were timing your symptoms when you were like in those early days of still working like that to work around that, so you knew when it was going to happen. And I just wonder how much of that is trying to compromise yourself so that you can accommodate others and accommodate situations that maybe you didn't even truly want to be in because they didn't align with that purpose.
Yeah, totally. And I think you do. Like, I didn't want people thinking I didn't have a good work ethic. For me, it's like I don't want to take time off and work for not being well. And it's like, this is ridiculous. I can't actually physically get to the office, or I can't, stand up to deliver training, or I can't, and I'm putting so much pressure on myself not to let others down instead of to really prioritising my own health. So I'm a lot better at doing that now, because when you do go through the dark periods, you realise the people you're worried about letting down, they're not there. Your manager's not there, so it does. It changes things. But, a lot of that was a long time ago. So I'm hoping now too that with changes, even it's been a real awakening with COVID to realise that, gosh, we can do so much, and how a flexible workplace, how much better is that for people living with illnesses or whatever it is, or mums returning to work, or there's so much we can do to help now.
Despite other people arguing for her limitations, Teisha was able to adjust her own mindset.
How much of this battle for you was trying to deflect the negative opinions of other people compared to what you're actually going through yourself?
I was extremely fortunate. My family are really positive, really supportive of any decisions I made, which is good. And I've got an incredible partner who I met then at age 30. So I'd already gone through some of these dark times, but he's been, around and really positive and extremely supportive. In a positive way as well. I couldn't cope with someone who was, making sure, always asking, are you all right? He's always like, take big steps, you're right. So he's really laid back with it all, which is good. Back to being surrounded by people, then you have to block out negative comments. You have to have a real inner confidence that the decisions you make are right for your journey. And for me, I kept thinking, have your opinion, but at the end of the day, you're not going to be in hospital bed or sitting in the wheelchair with me, unable to move. And sometimes I have made decisions which people I know give you funny looks. Even leaving Telstra, I was on a really good income. There was great supports there. And I left that to travel overseas by myself, So I was told by a financial advisor that was a stupid move. Telstra paid a great pension. And I was like, well, I'm in my mid-20s. All my friends are travelling. I want to travel. I can, I'm up and walking now. I want to get out of here and keep going. So I was confident that was the right decision for me, and it was the best decision I've ever made.
I think some people listening to that would think that's an incredibly brave decision to make from where I sit as well. I've recently made the decision with Louise to start this business, and we're bootstrapping and trying to get things started without any kind of financial backing, which is really interesting. Other people's opinions aside, I just want to come back to the concept of sympathy and how you actually dealt with what can sometimes be well-meaning but really misplaced. Is that something that can actually bog you down as you're trying to move forward?
Yeah, I think people soon learnt it just didn't work for me too. I was never surrounded, and I guess you attract like-minded people. So I was never surrounded by too many people who would come in to the hospital, see what I was looking like and say, oh no, what can we do? And I just, if anyone engaged like that, I'd just like, yep, fine, thanks. I just shut it down because it just wasn't helpful for me. And again, it wasn't denying what my experience was. Like I had a nurse once say, no, I think, she might be in denial. And I'm like, I'm lying here unable to move. No denying that, but I'm just not going to deal with it in the way you think I should. Yeah, you do have to be really strong. You really have to block out what other people are thinking and really have that inner confidence. And I think even the decision to travel away, to go away by myself built that confidence in me, which was good.
Is there a tendency to get stuck sometimes in a period of grief or around that grief response when entering a period of darkness with a chronic illness or something of that nature?
Yeah, totally. I think you actually sometimes can't see past what's in front of you, and it can be really difficult. And that's okay sometimes as well. Like I talk about, if you are in a place where, like, for example, lying in a hospital bed, unable to move, sometimes you can't see past that, and that's okay, and you need to do all types of things to protect your emotional well-being during those times by, for example, staying in the moment, not letting your mind wander too far ahead, because you go into such dark places and you just don't know how to get out of there. And I also think that sometimes people almost feel not comfort in that grief, but it is just really hard to pull yourself out of it. And sometimes you don't want to. You just want to sit with those emotions. And I think that's okay sometimes until you're in the place where you can move forward, and whether that's when you're starting to feel a little bit better, whether it's when you become more actively involved in getting better. When I was in hospital, I really struggled when I was just lying passively on a hospital bed, being pumped with drugs, unable to move. But as soon as I started getting involved in my recovery, then I felt like I was moving forward in some of that grief because I could see a way through it.
It really struck me reading through your material and listening to you speak that what you actually say is that it's really important not to deflect any of those emotions, that it's important to be with where you are.
Absolutely, because you can't deny those emotions. You do need to feel them. I talk about being positive, but you don't want to be positive and not authentic to how you're feeling. So if you feel absolutely crap, that's okay. Something bad's happened. You're allowed to feel terrible, and it's not fair that I can't keep up with my friends in my 20s. It's not fair that I can't walk properly. There's plenty of things that aren't fair, but you need to make a choice. Do you want to forever sit in that space, not happy with how things are, or do you want to somehow find it within yourself to move forward? And that's why I really focus on moving forward, because I wasn't happy being down and flat and negative. And that's no fun for people around you. And going back to the law of attraction, if you're in that headspace and you're in that emotion, you're not attracting positives around you, and you become sort of, I guess, blinded to any opportunities that could help you move forward.
I think when people do the thing that we are calling toxic positivity, when they say, oh, just don't think about it, or you could feel differently, you don't have to change anything, I don't think that they take into account chronic illnesses that get your attention because you can't escape your own body. So how do you deal with changing your mindset when your body is working against you?
I think I've learnt to focus on what I can do as opposed to really lamenting what I can no longer do. For me, even when I was really, I don't like the word dysfunctional, but, I was really immobile. I was really unable to walk, and at the beginning I was like, oh, that's not fair, I can't walk. But then I was getting excited because I could wriggle a toe, or I could move a foot. So I think it's very much, not accepting where my body was, because, gosh, I worked so hard in rehab and I do so much now. Like, I have a neurophysio come to the house every 2 weeks. I go to osteo. I do so much to maximise the functioning that I have. I'm certainly focus on what I can do and try and keep on improving that. Yeah, so it is hard though. Like when you do have limitations in your body, you're constantly reminded of what you can't do, but you really got to try and shift your focus onto what you can do.
We spoke to someone else for the series and he was involved in a bus accident and he had to reteach himself how to get a lot of mobility back. He said that one of the things that he would focus on every day just to help get him through, like he set like miniature goals, and it would be, if I can just fart today, that would be enough for me to do. I don't want to ask about all your bodily functions, Teisha, but were there things, is that kind of your experience as well? Like, can you set those tiny achievable goals to build that momentum?
Absolutely. And I did in rehab. I know in 2003 when I really struggled, it was really confronting not being able to use your arms and hands. Like I couldn't feel my hands. So even something like grabbing a glass of water and trying not to spill it was too hard. Like I couldn't do that. But then after a few weeks in OT, with an OT, I learned how to do that. So it was those little wins that you do have to celebrate. But what I did find really confronting was that was easy in a hospital setting when you're surrounded by people with similar challenges. But then when you put yourself into your everyday environment, that's when it got really difficult because then you kept being reminded of what you can't do. And I think, yeah, great, I can drink a glass of water without spilling it, fantastic. But I can't do, I can't type on my computer or I can't do all these other things. So that's when you have to really focus even more on those small wins. I also always made decisions and mapped out the worst case scenario. So I knew, worst case, I had another relapse, I was overseas, they can wheel me on the plane and I can get home. It's okay. So as soon as I acknowledged I had a plan, then I didn't keep thinking about it.
That's interesting you should bring that up because there's somebody else that we've spoken to along our course of conversations who was involved in essentially a shootout. He was shot multiple times and survived. And one of the things that he said to us was that way before that happened, he'd actually thought through the worst case scenario. What's the worst possible thing, aside from death, obviously? What's the worst possible thing that could happen to me and can I deal with that? Is that similar to the way you're actually planning your own contingencies or looking forward for yourself?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think once you do all of this work on yourself, and I feel really bad when I said early on, lots of people associate MS with ending up in a wheelchair, and that's like the worst case scenario. But I think, no, all that I've learnt now, of course I don't want that to be my future. But if it was, there's so much I've learnt that I could do to make sure I could still have a really good life. I could still be really flexible in what I do, in my outlook. Yeah, there's so much you could still do. So I never even think of that now as a worst case scenario because I think that's a little bit offensive too to people who are sitting in a wheelchair because you think, well, that's not my worst case scenario. My worst case scenario would be sitting in a wheelchair and being miserable and having a terrible life, but I wouldn't be that person. So I don't sort of think about that now.
I have a friend who a couple of years ago was diagnosed with, at the same time, MS and a thyroid cancer. She said, I would rather have cancer. And I thought that was, I don't know, that was awful. Like, her perspective of that, I don't know the way to put it because it's not that she really needs my help, but I know that she can look at things in a different perspective on that. But she's put that MS into the worst possible thing that could happen to her category.
And I think that's what people do. And I think if you... Like, I'm not, again, being negative against support groups for people with MS. They definitely have their place, and it's really great to, meet other people with MS and find out information that will help in your journey. But it's not then realising that people with MS, with cancer, with significant, like surviving a shooting, surviving a bus crash, that it's not comparing what condition or what experience is worse. It's like comparing what you've learnt. What have you learnt to get through that initial horror But then what have you learnt to create a life that you're enjoying? But I think that sometimes happens, like with your friend, you're trying to work out what's worse, and that's a hard spot to be in.
It's almost like when your body is has as a condition like MS, or I'm sure that I could apply a lot of different things to this, any kind of disabilities, whether they're physical or neurological, or it's like, I suppose the universe is telling you you're not going to conform, and I don't want it to sound any Pollyanna-ish around it, but it almost pushes you into your own power of saying, actually, I'm not going to conform like everybody else. I am going to find my own way and not do things just to please the status quo, because I suppose you can't.
No, that's right. It gives you permission to embrace your difference. I'm sure without MS, I would have, financially it would have been all right, been working my way up the corporate world and corporate, that would have happened, I'm sure, because I was getting lots of promotions, but I wouldn't have had the permission to really question whether that's right for me, because how do you give up that sometimes unless something significant in your life happens? And when it does happen, from your experience from friends and families that we take stock. We really think what is important. And I think that's what's happened with COVID as well. All of a sudden, people are reassessing, is it really important to spend 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day commuting back and forward to an office in a city?
You're speaking directly to me now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So something like that. COVID's been a massive interruption to everyone's life, and it's forced us to reassess. And when you've lived through something like dealing with an illness, it hasn't been difficult for me to make changes because I'm used to doing that. But for some people, it's been their first experience of really having their life thrown upside down.
Do you think your journey has actually made you more adept at looking for options?
Totally. Yeah, I'm constantly, and I talk about being an active participant in my life, and part of that is continually challenging your thinking and coming up with different options and being flexible, knowing where you want to go, but doing it in different ways. So, yes, I've always wanted to travel. I always wanted to go to Africa. I grew up, Dad had worked at World Vision, and I'd always wanted to go to Africa. MS and heat don't match. And instead of thinking, well, I can't do anything, I ended up sub-zero winter in Romania. And it was an amazing experience. So I always talk about be open to the possibilities. Think about what you want to do, but don't be caught up on detailed plans. And for someone who in their 20s loved planning, loved feeling in control, that was a really difficult shift. But now you realise that when you don't have detailed plans, when you don't assume, you know how you're going to get somewhere, that's where the magic happens. That's where all of a sudden in your life you have some amazing experiences that you never imagined.
So do you think there could be some more, I guess I'm asking a bit of a Dorothy Dix here. I'm sorry, but I kind of get the sense that with a lot of the larger corporations and businesses, they're missing out on a lot of value by not actually accommodating some of the needs of people who have chronic illnesses or who aren't neurotypical, that type of thing, that there's so much more that they could offer.
I agree. We're talking about embracing our own difference and diversity. I don't think workplaces embrace diversity, difference, and they're not accommodating, they're not flexible, they're not innovative to ensure that everyone's accommodated for. I guess one of my greatest challenges in living with MS was my career, because I worked really hard at high school. I went on to study and got a couple of degrees. I was on the graduate program at Telstra. That was my focus. And then it's like, if I can't commit to doing that full-time job, there's no other options. And so I really did social work because I wanted that shift and through my experiences, but I also thought, well, maybe I can get a bit more part-time work and flexible working hours, but then that didn't work for my health and I was sick again, so I had to swap and change career. So it's really, really difficult finding a job which aligns with your priorities in creating work-life balance.
How do you help someone in that mindset?
I just, again, if you're like, try and shift the focus on comparing, because I talk about shifting your mindset from the external, so from the disease or from the injury onto yourself. So it's not about what the disease is and which one is worse. It's about how, faced with those particular challenges for that particular disease or that particular injury, what in your toolbox can you use for those specific challenges? For me, it's never been about really trying to find out more about the external, about the actual problem.
I want to come back to the point around, the real value that you say that support groups have, and I just want to explore this concept of personal knowledge being the power that we have to understand individually how we can respond. But also you speak about the concept of agitation, and I wonder if that is where motivation lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. That I think you're going to feel frustrated. Life's changed, you're going to feel frustrated, but you need to use that energy to motivate you to move forward. You need to signify to the universe, I'm pissed off with how life is, but I'm going to do everything I can to change that. You're faced with a choice. You either sit with being angry and frustrated, which you can, you deserve to feel like that. Like I'm allowed to be annoyed with how my life has turned out, but you either fill yourself with more agitation. That's not going to help your health. That's going to make whatever, your condition or your situation even worse. And you become in this cycle. Or you use that energy to propel you forward and think, okay, it's hard work making change, but I'm not happy where I am, so I'm going to have to do something about it. But it's your choice. You have to make that choice yourself.
Sometimes one of the things that I get stuck on with that is like if a situation occurs and it's not a pleasant situation for me, if it's something that's painful or, if it's me heading into depression or whatever it might be, I always kind of think like, what did I do to cause this? And I don't think that's right anymore.
No.
Have you thought that?
No. I'm really... And I never thought of that with MS either.
Yeah.
When I got MS, I never thought, I grew up going to Baptist church Sunday school, so maybe I should have been thinking I've been punished. But I never thought of it like that. I always thought, what can I do to learn from this and how can I get through it? So, and perhaps that was also because I grew up in a house where Dad worked at World Vision, so I was always really aware of other people around the world. Like my world was I was very aware of people everywhere going through things. So I always thought, well, I'm sure, when I was growing, I was only 10 when the famine in Ethiopia, I never thought they've all done something to deserve that. It's like, how do you help them to get through this? So I think I took that mindset. Yeah, so I still have that mindset that, I haven't done anything to cause this, but I'm going to use everything I have to get through it.
I think that's the place that I've aimed to be for the longest time. I think that idea of, you can believe these laws exist and this is how it is, but you don't have to put blame on yourself that you've done something wrong, because this could be something going right instead.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I wouldn't be where I am today, and I like my life now. I think if I didn't like my life, then I'd be a bit more annoyed at what had happened. But I like where I am. So, even I've got an amazing partner and I love our life together. We would never have met. I wouldn't have moved to Bendigo. I wouldn't have the whole other story of how we met. But, that would never have happened if it wasn't for MS, because I still would have been living in Southbank. There's no way I would have been, training as a social worker, living and working in Bendigo.
It's almost like there are options. There's always an option. If we have something that comes into our pathway, we've got the option to beat ourselves up over it and have a miserable time, or to find a way out of it.
Absolutely. And it's our choice. And I think I'm in a good position working with people because I'm faced with that choice as well. all the time, to either focus on all that's gone wrong or somehow find it within myself to go forward and create a good life. And that takes really hard work. So it's not easy, but the reward, it's worth it, because, even traveling overseas, when you travel overseas and you're part of, I was in Scotland, in Edinburgh for the year, and you look at the Edinburgh Castle and you think, my life is such a tiny blip in history. I don't want to waste it being consumed by MS and how this has negatively impacted my life. So somehow I need to move beyond that negative energy. So I'm just really pleased that I've been able to do that, because I don't want to have a miserable life. I want to be excited. I want to enjoy my life now. I want to be excited about the future. And I am. And so I can tell people that, in an honest way, that's really where I am today.
The health program that you've developed, that's come from your coping skills, I suppose. Is that your direct process?
Yeah, it is. Health came about, for those listening, health, the acronym represents the stages I've navigated through since being diagnosed with MS. And really, health came about because in 2012, my last relapse, I realised my experience with that relapse was so different to early on. My experience in hospital was different. My emotionally, physically, it was so different. And I realised how my life is just unrecognisable to what it was years ago. From where I was living to my work, so many aspects of my life had changed. And I was meditating and I scribbled health down, and I realised that each letter encapsulated each of the stages I've navigated through, from hurdle to hope. And it then became, I'm very logical in my thinking, and health became a way of me at each stage sharing my insights. So when you go through a hurdle, when a hurdle arrives, when you go through that absolute crisis, it's what helps you to get through that moment. And then at each stage, it's sharing my insights to help you to keep moving forward. And sometimes the first 3 stages is about minimising the emotional impact of what you're going through. So what strategies help you out when you're awake at night, can't see past the hurdle, can't see past this massive interruption, and then how to deal, like we're talking about, how to deal with agitation, how to deal with frustration and use that to your advantage. And then I talk about the LTH, how you let go, take time and live with hope in your life. So again, it's all of those insights. So I've got lots of insights at each stage, but then for me, I use health when I'm feeling lost, when I'm feeling down, when I don't know what to do next. I use it as an emotional checklist to think, okay, I'm sitting here, what do I need to do to move forward? It's been, initially it was really for me to make sense of what I was going through, for me to use when I was feeling really in a not so good space. But now I presented that in the second half of my book. I realised how much it helped others as well. And that's what I'm excited about.
It's really incredible that something's just struck me, that in all the talk that you've talked about with your previous career aspirations and so forth in corporate training, you've really done a massive reframe and become a trainer in health now.
I know. What's amazing is, reflecting back, I've had so many incredible experiences work-wise that have led me to where I am now. So I was writing training material for Telstra. I was, upfront trainer. I've worked with people as a social worker. I was working within emergency housing. I was working as a housing support worker at a prison. I was, seeing people at their lowest points. And all of these experiences have helped me look outside of myself, but also, really helped in presenting a tool, because I just didn't want to get up in front of people and say, you know what, you can get through this. It's not that bad. Keep going. I wanted to be able to say to people, it is tough, but there are things you can do to help you move forward. And so that's what I'm excited about.
It's really poignant that you mentioned this as well, because over the course of the last 6 months when Louise and I have been putting our business together, I've said to her, look, I don't know what I'm bringing to this, because you've got 20 years of broadcasting experience. I've got a couple of years of that, but I've been working in different industries. And the one thing that she's consistently supported me by saying is that, well, you've actually had a journey amongst a lot of other things that you're bringing in to what we're doing. So for me now to come in to an interview like this with yourself, having worked in aged care and having worked in customer service and sales and different parts and relating to people in different ways, I'm now able to bring that experience and help you share your story as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, again, back to what I was saying about identifying and reinforcing your strengths. You bring all of those experiences and all those strengths to what you're doing now, and that's what's so important to highlight to people when you're going through real massive challenges. I know too, starting a business, massive challenge. So, that can be really difficult, but there's so much you can bring from previous experiences. And that makes you feel better because, it's, again, I don't celebrate having MS, but I want to make something of all of these experiences. I want to be able to share them, but in a constructive way.
Do you think a diagnosis has to become your identity?
No, not at all. And that's why I talk about hope, where you're no longer defined by what's happened to you. I'm no longer defined by MS. It's not on my mind all the time. Sometimes I read a story about someone with MS and I'm like, oh, that's awful. And I'm thinking, no, I've got that disease. That's me. And then, so it's not there. I'm not thinking about it all the time. And of course, I'm reminded when my walk-in's not great. And whenever I get annoyed at that, I think, yeah, but my legs have been through so much. Like, I'm up and walking now and I am moving. And I was never into running or anything beforehand. So it's not like, MS stole my, I wasn't really big into fitness anyway. But yeah, you're reminded of what you can't do, but no, it definitely doesn't define me. And I actually think it's given me a sense of freedom in my life that without MS, I don't think I would have necessarily had that confidence to make decisions that I've made. And that's not saying I celebrate. I'm not one of those people to say, yeah, I really celebrate having MS. Like, I wish I didn't ever, have experienced this disease, but it has helped me evolve, and I've had amazing experiences I'm sure I wouldn't have had without MS.
A lot of what you're talking about is kind of moving forward from where you are and how you're focusing, what you're thinking of. How do you balance that in telling your story and making public profile out of sharing that story? Because it could be seen as reliving the bad parts, but it's not, because you're obviously finding empowerment in that.
And it's recognising too, and when you are living with an illness like MS, you don't move forward and stay forward. You don't all of a sudden like, okay, I talk about going from hurdle to hope. You don't reach hope and think, done. All of a sudden something else is going to happen. But the silver lining is you've learnt so much that you can get through that next challenge so much easier. And there's times when you can't move forward. There's times, but that focus then is about protecting your emotional well-being and not damaging yourself too much if you do end up back in hospital or you do end up, whatever the situation is. So you're looking after yourself. And then, you then find it within yourself to move forward and celebrate that. But I've gone back and forth so many times because I became really good at letting go and making changes. I had career changes, I had travelled overseas. There's so many things that I did, but I kept getting sick. So it wasn't until I really learnt to reassess how I looked at different parts of my life and my assumptions I had, that I finally started to really consolidate that change and really experience good health. And my health has been, I haven't had a relapse in 10 years, whereas for the first 10 years in MS, I was in and out of hospital all the time. So my health is better, but it was only when I consolidated the change and really challenged my way of thinking.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not just people affected by, chronic illnesses that I think that can relate to trying to bend themselves in ways to, make other people happy and compromise themselves. I kind of think we're all doing that. But one of the things I kind of wanted to go back to when you mentioned that when we talk about the idea of moving through, like you don't really move through MS. It's not, you don't get to the finish line and then suddenly it's all okay. Like you can come back. And I think of how that relates to my experience with like depressive episodes. As much as I'd like to say that, today on my score chart, I'm only mildly depressed and that's a win. I've noticed that over, the course of my life, they come back again and again, triggered by, whatever it might be. I suppose it's like I'm never actually cured of that, because if I don't do the work every day to try and keep on top of something like that, then my thoughts will get out of control and things will happen, and there's not an end goal to any of those situations that we're living in.
No, that's right. And that's the same with so many experiences people have, and you do have to keep working on yourself, and you do have to apply then what you've learnt in previous episodes or, periods of poor health to what you're experiencing now, and you get better at it, I guess, if you sort of want to as well. So if you do the hard work, I know, chatting to my physio, she said some people get really annoyed that because of their illness, they have to do so much work to getting their body up and right. Whereas I think, well, that's just part of it. Like I'm just grateful that she comes around and can help me. So it's all of that work that you do, but the outcome of that is a positive one because you're better equipped to deal with whatever challenge. And I think too, like having gone through something like MS, it equips you to deal with any challenges that come your way. And MS is not the only thing you have to deal with in life. Something's always going to come across our paths, and at least I'm better equipped to deal with that.
I think often we look for a magic bullet or a magic pill that's going to make everything better or everything go away. Do you think that there is something within each of us that's different, that we can find that strength and motivation in?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting, everyone's experience with MS is very different, but that's because we've all been very different in our outlooks in life before being diagnosed. So I think, you really need to build on the strengths you display in all aspects of your life, and then apply those and remind yourself of those when you're dealing with something. So build on those strengths. I really think it's important when working with people to highlight those strengths, and those strengths don't abandon you when you're faced with something like a long stay in hospital, but you need to call on them to help you out. Yeah, to learn from what you're going through and learn what works and learn what works for you.
What does your day look like? What's in the Teisha toolkit to start your day, to keep going? What are the processes you're using personally?
I start with stretching. A friend who's got MS says sometimes we, get out of bed like a pocket knife, the pocket knives that are all, so I've got to stretch out. So, I stretch. At the moment, my day starts with very fortunate to have a boy who grew up on a farm, so I've got the fireplace happening. So I sit and chill and just have a moment of quietness. And I don't want to pretend that I do heaps of meditation. Like, I know the importance of quietening my mind. So I just, quieten my mind however I feel like I want to do that, staring at a flame or sitting outside or listening to some relaxing music. And then I'm really big at looking at after my health. So again, I don't follow strict diets, but just making sure I have a really good meal. And then for me at the moment, it's about walking down to my office and, working remotely. I'm doing some auditing work of disability services at the moment, which is really interesting, listening to everyone's stories, and interviewing lots of people who receive services from NDIS providers. So I'm doing that, and any time I have free, and I'm really trying to free up my diaries to try and be creative and work on my business. But then, my days are always filled with lots of appointments. I go to osteo. I'm really big into energy healing, so I make appointments to see, someone doing Reiki or crystal healings, or like I need that. Like, don't get me to explain what happens in those sessions because I don't quite get it. But it works for me. And then, I have physio. I've also, during lockdown, we bought a total fit gym, which has been amazing. So I can almost roll myself onto it and roll myself off it, but do a bit of a workout. So I'm just trying to stay active as best I can, and just look after myself.
We spoke to a neuroscientist the other day. Because I said, she was explaining, I think it was the neuroscientist, wasn't it, Andy? We were talking about meditation and how the brain just kind of can't help itself, but when you get quiet and it just runs off and it starts thinking about other things. And I almost now feel like that's given me permission to say, well, I'm a shit meditator, but if I can find something else that calms my mind, then that kind of works just as well. If it will
Absolutely.
let me, so I give you permission to not have to meditate. and if Reiki or crystal healing or any of is that's the thing that helps you calm your mind, then I think it works, and I think that our neuroscientists would say it works just as well.
Yes. It's very funny, actually. I'm doing all this. I was learning through a group in America with 2,000 people on a call about, developing online courses and launching those courses and creating an online business. And the person who flashed up, who I've now connected to, is a neuroscientist who also lives in Melbourne and who's running online courses for interpreting MRI scans. And it's amazing, that connection. So that's how, when we talk about all of these stuff, and I've never heard of a neuroscientist before until I met her and then your conversation. So now she's one of my best friends.
A good friend to have.
Good friend to have.
Yes, very handy when you've got MS and have lots of MRIs.
Absolutely. I like this sense also that you talk about letting go, not being about giving up. I like this concept that you're talking about when you're talking about the crystals and the Reiki and, what some people would consider as very alternative therapies, that it doesn't really matter whether you understand it or not, or understand how that's impacting on you. But the important thing is that it is impacting on you.
100%. And that, for me, the learnings out of exploring alternative therapies, and I say that, I've always had a neurologist, always followed Western medicine, but also started exploring alternative therapies. And for me, it was so freeing that I didn't have to understand it. And I would say that, different people will roll their eyes at you, and that's embracing your difference as well. I think, I'm going down a different path. That's okay. I don't really care what you think about that. If it works for me, I'm going to do it. And it's given me a lot of confidence in exploring all different ways to making sure I'm healthy and well. And that's part of really applying a logical, a rational mind to dealing with MS. Logically, rationally, having crystals on your body and them making you feel so much better doesn't make a lot of sense, but it works. And I think, I don't need to understand it. It doesn't matter. How do I make logical sense of getting MS as a 22-year-old who's really healthy? You can't. So exploring different alternative ways of conceptualizing your health has been an amazing experience and a real sort of gift, I guess, of having something like MS.
I think it's so important to find something that works for us, whatever it is, wherever you're coming from in life and your circumstances, to keep trying things until you find something that works for you. Anything along that continuum, anything, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Just find something that makes you a happier person.
Yeah, 100%, and not caring what others think. Yes. And, I'm with someone who's really down to earth, who's, tradie, and when I explain to him, like, he's hilarious. He really tries to understand what I'm experiencing in these sessions, and he's like, yep, and really trying to meet me there. But for him, when I say, but I'm not going to tell this person or that person, I'm not going to write about it in my book, he's like, why do you give a whatever about what people think? Who cares? And it's so true. And that's my motto after meeting him, is like, don't give a F about what people think, because he has that self-assurance. That's helped me a lot. And I used to not use a walking stick. And he's like, that's ridiculous, that you're prepared to not go out or not walk that extra 200 meters because you're worried about what people think. So I take that to, physically being different. I take his motto about not caring about what people think, as well as exploring alternative therapies, because you're right. If it works for you, do it. Don't be afraid of what people think.
What are you excited about today?
I'm excited about where my course is going to go. I'm really excited about the people that I'm going to meet and who, I haven't finished learning. I'm excited about listening to some of the other stories on your podcast, because that's part of moving forward. It's about learning from others. It's about opening your mind to new possibilities. I want this experience to result in, I guess, a positive impact for others.
I'm excited to see where your course takes you and all the people that it helps. I'm very excited to watch what happens with you in the next few months.
Oh, thank you. It is. It's exciting times, hard work, but good.
And Teisha did work hard in the almost 12 months since our chat with her, but as we were approaching to run the interview, she reached out with some news we thought was important to share as part of this episode, because it further illustrates just how durable her mindset is as she applies the principles of her own course to her own life.
Hey there. Just wanted to take a little breather from today's episode and say thank you so much for listening to us. Make sure you never miss an episode by hitting the follow button on your podcast app now. And while you're there, we'd love it if you left us a review. It really does help to boost us so we can reach even more people. You can also check out our Patreon page to see how you can access even more content at patreon.com/reframe of mind. And remember to tell everyone you know about us, because the more people we get talking about mental health, the more supported we'll all be. The reason we have you back for the addendum at the end of the episode is you have new news, which impacts what we'd been talking about in that previous interview. Do you want to put it in your words?
Yeah, for sure. So as we chatted about previously, 25 years ago, I was diagnosed with MS, and to mark that anniversary, the universe, I guess, has given me another challenge, and just recently I've been diagnosed with breast cancer.
Yeah, and it's quite... Most of the time you get paper for an anniversary.
I know.
Yeah.
And look, it's really unexpected, and it's all happened really quickly. I went from finding a lump to straight away going to my GP, then had the scans, biopsy, and those dreaded words from the GP saying, so sorry, but it's cancer. And I said to her, not the outcome I was visualising, because I really didn't think anything of the lump. I mean, it was a substantial lump, but I just thought, it's got to be a cyst, it's come up quickly. And I always thought, I've got my disease, cancer's not going to be my journey. But unfortunately, it doesn't quite work like that. So it's all happened very, very quickly, but fortunately, I've been straight away, I could see a surgeon, and it's gone from there. So it's been a massive roller coaster.
It sounds as though you're handling things remarkably well for something that's, I think fairly recent, isn't it, the diagnosis?
Yeah, it's only been 6 weeks, and I feel like I've had 2 diagnoses within that as well. Mm-hmm. So at the beginning, I was told there was a lump that was cancerous in my breast. And then due to the size of the lump, I was strongly advised I'd have a mastectomy. So I had to get my head around that. And I certainly had the faith in my surgeon that that was the right way to go. So I spent a week sort of grieving that, coming to terms emotionally with that decision and being very comfortable with that decision, to all of a sudden being called up the afternoon before actually the surgery. And I was told that unfortunately 2 other spots have been found. So the surgery has to be put on hold, because now we've got 2 cancerous spots on my liver and also on my sternum. So again, that I didn't do so well on that weekend. I had a few days before I then saw the oncologist where, I tried not to let my mind wander, but stage 4 breast cancer, a lump on your liver, not great. So, yeah, that was a pretty traumatic weekend.
A very different situation as well from what you've actually been dealing with for the last 25 years, which is multiple sclerosis. So how do you feel the way you've actually been battling MS or facing MS, as we discovered in our last conversation? How well do you think that prepared you or steeled you for what actually happened here?
Yeah, it helped me a lot, actually, even though it's very different because I'm 47 now. I was 22 when I was diagnosed with MS, so your view of the world is very different as a 22-year-old. But lots of, I guess, the strategies, the insights I've taken from living with MS did help. Just simple things too, it was a pretty long 3 days, and I made sure I didn't do any late night Google searches on what was happening. I asked the surgeon, what website should I go to? Because, I always talk about with MS, information is power. You need to be able to navigate through the medical world, but you don't want it to become all-consuming. So I really took that on board with this whole experience. And, simple things that I tell people about living with MS, stay in the moment and don't let your mind catastrophize everything and one challenge at a time. I took that on board and it helped. Otherwise, I just didn't want to go into really dark places until I spoke to the oncologist.
I think that you have handled this, from my point of view, exceptionally, level-headedly, well-rounded, like when we often talk about this concept of toxic positivity in our show, and it's this idea that people just stick that Band-Aid over it and slap a platitude on it and say, oh, it'll be okay. But you've done serious work on processing all this and come into that place where you're able to speak about this like that when you're still very much a part of that journey. So how have you made that place? Because you're not slopping. We know you. Yeah. You're not toxic positivitying this at all. No. You're doing the work as best you can, I suppose, change the diagnosis, but also to reframe your thinking around it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the positivity, I'm exactly the same in terms of you've got to feel all the feels in terms of I'm very fortunate I've got such a supportive network around me. So I had lots of tears with Andrew and my parents and brother and sister-in-law and friends as well. But it's also not staying in that energy because it doesn't help. So from my perspective, I just know that. So you be positive, and I've got a good outlook with it. I don't know what's going to happen, but there's lots of positives you can take out of the diagnosis. Like for me, it was horrendous finding these spots, but thank goodness I did, or else I could have had my mastectomy and felt like I was cancer-free, and then in 3 or 4 years' time, they could have been there, festering underneath and become a lot bigger. So I'm happy that they've been found now. I'm very fortunate. The tumours are hormone receptor. I'm learning all these new terms.
But not from Dr. Google?
No, not from Dr. Google, Breast Cancer Network Australia. And really what that means is I was assuming I'd go straight on to chemo. I was walking around, hair up in a beanie saying, do I still look nice? I'm trying to, I thought, well, boobs are staying for a while, but then maybe my hair will go and all. And I thought, oh, well, I'll own that. And if it happens, it happens. But then I was told, well, no, hormone therapy and menopause is going to come on hard. I think that, so that's going to be really full on. But it's still not denying those feelings. It's still going into some of those dark places, but choosing not to sit there and choosing to surround yourself, not just with positive people, but people, and I write this in my course, whose opinion you value and trust. Yeah. And being able to go to those sources. So when you're feeling down or scared, chatting to those people to hold you in those moments.
Did the absence of the need for chemo feel like it was a bit of a relief? Did that help you come to terms in a different way with the diagnosis? Or do you feel like that it was actually just the way you approached it in general from how you normally approach the challenges you face?
Well, it was funny. When the oncologist said that, Andrew said, are we, and he's like, I know, it's not all great, but are we allowed to skip out of here? Because I think we were fearing the worst. Then that's good. It still may be. It still may, if this doesn't work, then I said to the oncologist, that's okay. You know, we then do chemo, whatever you think is the best choice in terms of treatment plans. So I still may need a mastectomy. I still may need radiotherapy. There's so many unknowns. But with MS has taught me is to not try and fill in those unknowns. I really need to just face them when they arrive and not try and fill in the gaps.
What's the biggest resource you're using at the moment to support yourself?
Unfortunately, Andrew's been amazing in terms of, I won't tell you all the boob jokes. He's been trying to make me feel good about, losing them. And I said, oh, you've got to suck up to them now. I said, because they're here to stay, So, he's been amazing. And my mum and dad, my brother, everyone's been amazing around me. And I think perhaps we talked about this last time as well. What I've been able to do in living with MS is surround myself, not necessarily with people with MS, but similar outlooks. So similar outlooks when you're going through adversity or facing challenges. And so I feel like lots I had to do, or not weeding out people, but, having closer friendships with people who energise you and don't drag you down. I've already done that process. So I'm surrounded with such amazing people that I feel like I can get my strength through others as well. And I'm a talker. So, people would say, I don't want to bother you and call. And I said, no, call. That's fine. give Andrew a rest. Because I like talking through things, and that's how I deal with things as well. So I just feel like strategies like that, I've got those in place already. And the whole, should I do medical world or alternative therapies, I've already been through that, and I know to get through this, I need both. So I've already, had people reach out to me and do remote healings on me, and, I'm meditating, I'm visualising, my tumour's been filled with white light as I go to sleep at night. So I'm doing all of that to keep me at peace. And then I'm doing all the medical. But for me, quietening my mind means that I'm guided to the right people in the medical world as well. And that's what I feel like has happened.
I think you sound like you've set really healthy boundaries, I suppose, for the people in your life around the diagnosis. How have you done that? Because I know when my father got diagnosed with cancer, everybody had an opinion on what he should be doing. And so I think a lot of people are very well-intentioned.
Yeah,
but how have you managed to kind of stay focused on your journey and not take on, if you've managed to do that so far? You sound like you have, but,
Yeah, very much so. I just take on board people's opinions who matters to me. So if someone else can have an opinion, but I've got enough inner confidence knowing that I'm on the right path. So, some people say, oh, have you got a second opinion and all? And I was like, I don't need to. Like, I would if I didn't feel like I could trust the person in front of me talking to me, but I haven't reached that point at all. I totally trust what they're saying, and that's not naive. The person who diagnosed me with MS wasn't the person who guided me through those horrendous early years with MS, because I didn't connect with the person who diagnosed me. And I made that choice very early on to go to another neurologist. And I haven't felt that this time. I have been guided to the right people every step of the way. So I'm very confident of who I'm surrounded, and all people will have their opinion, whether I should be back working, which I started working again this week, or whether I shouldn't, whether I should do chemo or not, and that's fine. They can have their opinions, but it's my body and it's me. And some people say, don't share what they're going through with cancer. And I was straight away open. It's like, yep, going in to have my, boob cut off, and then the next one will be going later on in the year and all. And it's like, I've just got to own what's happening to create awareness. But it's thinking, well, I'm taking a bit of control back here. I'm saying no. I don't want to be dominated by cancer. But that's been the real mind shift now. So I went from thinking, right, cancer's gone, I'm going to be cutting it out and it will disappear, to now thinking, okay, cancer's going to be part of my life for a while longer, and there's every chance that these tumours will shrink, but they'll still be there. So now I've got to get my head around now living with cancer.
Do people treat you differently when you tell them? And if they do, how would you prefer that they treated you?
No, probably don't treat me because
Oh, really?
with MS, I didn't own it as much early on. Like, I would be not as confident in disclosing or having that discussion. Anyone knows if they put on a funny voice and, oh, how are you going and all, I just don't engage with that. So people know not to do that with me. Like, it's just not how and I know some people need that and then play into that, but that's not how I deal with things. And I think people are almost now know that. That's how I've been with MS. So people don't even do that with me now at all. And if they do, I probably don't notice because I'm just confident that I'm on the right path. So I just don't take it on board. Whereas I was a lot more sensitive to it early on.
We've spoken in the series so far to a guy called Derek McManus, and he draws a distinction between resilience and durability. So he sees it as a continuum from vulnerability to resilience, where you can bounce back from vulnerability, to durability, where you can basically prepare for the worst and manage it much better without having to go back to that point of vulnerability. Does that resound with the way you actually approach this now?
Yeah, I think, and that's sort of what I talk about as well, is that you gain all of these insights that even if you may bounce back and another hurdle interrupts your life, you go through another crisis, you've learnt so much, you've built this resilience, you've gained all of these insights, you've evolved as to how you deal with these crises, that you never go back to that point of a 22-year-old who had no idea what was going on, not how to, it took me 10 years really to work out how to approach MS without keeping on getting sick all the time. And it took some very aggressive relapses for me to realise that what I was doing, how I was dealing with it, wasn't working. So I'll never go back to that stage again. So if it's in that sort of outlook, then yeah, that's how I see it as well.
You probably don't remember because we recorded that original interview a while ago now, and you haven't heard it yet because it's releasing week after next. But you said to us that sometimes you're reading a story about someone with MS and you're like, oh, that poor person, and that you forgot that you actually have it when you're reading it. And I reckon that that's a place you're going to get to again for this. It's not a question, Teisha. It's just I think you're pretty fucking awesome.
Oh, thank you. But I'm just laughing because last night there was, I forget what it was a story on the news about breast cancer. And the same thing, I was saying to Andrew, gosh, that's amazing what they're doing and, that's really tough. And I'm like, oh, I'm one of them. That's me. And I'm like, yeah, so I'm just chuckling because that's what happened last night, even though it's very raw and very real. And I don't want to be defined by this. I don't want to, of course, read other people's stories and take out of it what their approach was, but I don't want notifications from breast cancer groups and all keeping buzzing on. There's a place for them, absolutely, and I was invited onto one with, 4,000 other amazing women, and it's a great source of information to search on and all, but the notifications, every half hour is bang, 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 breast cancer, breast cancer, breast cancer, and then I had, one MS one, I was like, oh, God, it's between MS, breast cancer, and I don't want that. I don't want that reminder all the time that this is what I've got. And again, that's not denial. No denying. There's a lump there for me to feel on my breast, but I just don't want to be constantly defining and reminding myself that this is my next challenge.
Someone I know actually had a similar experience when she had breast cancer, where she did join some of those support groups. She said, they're excellent resources, but what she felt in the end was that she went so far with the group but felt that the energy was really just kind of keeping her there, that it wasn't really helping her to move on from that. Do you think that some of the support networks have something to learn with how they support people, or is it just a case of people being at different stages?
Yeah, and different. I've got my support around me, and then I've got amazing specialists around me. So if I really need an answer to a question, I can ask them. So I think there definitely a positive for lots of people. But I think if you're not being energised by them, or if you're not finding them to benefit you moving forward, then I don't think it's the place to be. And I think I've grown up in relation to that. At the beginning I thought, no, these MS groups are depressing, they're stifling and all, but I think they certainly serve a purpose for people if they don't have, an amazing partner or family or friends or network around them. But for me, it's too much and it's really overwhelming. And then, you're hearing about a tumour on the liver and what that means. And this person has, passed away from that. And I thought, I just can't have that as my goal to look forward to, So I just don't want to fill my head with that information.
Where are you up to with the Hurdle to Hope stuff? You said before that you were going to do work again, despite what other people might think.
Yeah.
What's the plan?
Yeah, well, the irony of all of this is that I was just about to launch my Hurdle to Hope MS course. And this all happened. And it's funny because, I'm all into signs and all. And I kept thinking, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right that it's just about MS. I don't want to be the subject matter expert on MS.
You didn't have to go and get cancer though, just to
I
be
know,
a little
that's
bit more of an expert.
You could have broken your leg or
to
something.
The universe. Yeah, I know. And that's what I've been laughing about as well. It's like, who up there's playing with me? Because, so I put a hold on that, but I certainly haven't put a hold on the course because all of my insights, I was going through my worksheets to help me get through this last few weeks, and I thought I'm doing my own beta course, Audience 1, but it's a very good course. It's good testing, and it works, and it's helped me get through what has been a horrendous time. So I feel now I'm getting more insights from the perspective of someone in their 40s as opposed to, like I said, in my sort of early to mid 20s. And I know with this course I'm going to talk about how Hurdle to Hope, how the health framework was born in relation to my life with MS, but now I'm applying it and now it's getting me through this really dark period. So no, this will add a dimension to my course, and I think it will make it so much more relatable to so many people, not just to do it on breast cancer, but any life-changing illness. Because what this highlights is, it doesn't matter if my fear is about being in a wheelchair or wherever cancer will take me, it's still the same insights that help you to keep moving forward and really help you to adjust your response every step of the way, whether that's trying to come to terms with a mastectomy or now, having, hormone therapy or chemo or whatever it is. So no, I think it's going to be a better course, Louise.
Excellent. Tried and tested. You can write the little review on the cover and stuff for yourself. 5-star worked for me.
Yeah, excellent.
Is there anything that we haven't asked you that you would like to say in relation to any of this?
No, I think, what these conversations do is really highlight the impact we can have on whatever happens. And what I often talk about is unexpected hurdles will keep interrupting our life. And that's what's happened to me. And it's not about sitting and waiting for that to happen. It's about having the confidence that if that does happen, that you have the insights, the tools, that you can actually get through it. And that's what this is demonstrating to me, that yes, I've lived with MS for, over half my life, and it's given me so many amazing insights that I know that I'll get through this. And I have that inner confidence, and that's not a denial, it's just the inner confidence that I know, that I can deal with whatever comes my way now.
It's so true, isn't it? I think often we put these things on pedestals of I'll fix this. It'll be, once this is done, then I'll never have to go through anything ever again. And that's not how life works.
No, that's right. And it's why as well, you know, I say to friends will ring up or, you know, chatting about different things and they're like, oh, sorry, you know, I know you're going through that. And I'm like, it's not all about my boobs at the moment, you know. Other things are happening to other people at the moment that we all go through stuff. And it doesn't matter. When we're talking about those support groups, they're great, but you can learn a lot from other people around you about how to deal with this situation, even if they haven't been through breast cancer. So I find it hard when people don't want to talk about it and think, oh, they don't know how I feel. And that's fine. They don't know how I feel, but I don't know how they feel going through whatever they have to deal with at the moment. So, yeah, for me, it's about just getting insights from people from all parts of your life.
I want to hear those boob jokes before we end. I think we need to end on some of your husband's boob jokes.
No. They stay in the bedroom. No. I'm gone red. And it's not. But I think it just means that, you know, and I was, like, of course I was really upset. And I had horrible dreams one night and I was in this war-torn country and people were trying to slash my boobs. So it was awful. And I woke up like I could hardly breathe and all. And it's those moments where, you know, you're comforted and all, but then the next morning that you can laugh about things. Or, you know, well, he said to the surgeon, I'll make sure he doesn't listen to this part of the podcast, but, you know, talked about having, you know, a mastectomy and all, and he's like, oh, any chance you can make them look like, you know, a 25-year-old's? And she's like, oh, sorry, you know, she's got 47-year-old skin and all, and he's like, I'm joking, you know, cut them off, doesn't matter, you know. And for us, it's just been trying to just normalise it all and laugh when we can laugh about things and be serious. And if we are upset, be upset. If you're angry, be angry. But I'm really choosing not to stay in that anger. And I think there's a lot of anger, you know, lots of hashtags about, you know, F off cancer or whatever it is. And I don't want to be in that space because I think these tumours are in my body at the moment and I don't want to get angry at them and make them angrier. It's like I just want to not be at peace with them being there. I want them gone, but for whatever reason they're there, I'll work that out and hopefully watch them slowly shrink.
We hope that as your journey progresses that you keep us up to date, because I think you have now 2 incredible stories and we're rooting for you. And
yeah, we're looking forward to hering about the shrinkage of the tumours as well.
Excellent, thank you. And I promise I won't be ringing for an update. No more big unexpected hurdles for us.
Excellent. You just show us how to get over those hurdles instead. I think that's your mission.
That's right. I'll focus on my team.
Next time on Reframe of Mind, we'll look a bit more deeply at the art of not letting other people's opinions shape our experience, along with Derek McManus and 2021 New South Wales Young Australian of the Year, Nathan Parker.
Yeah, I think for me it was about seeing what was possible. I knew deep down, I had a sense deep down that I think I can still do this. And I was very lucky along the way to have so many incredible people give me opportunities to try and see what was possible.
You've been hearing our story, now we really want to hear yours.
Connect with @Reframe of Mind on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok and Twitter.
Or connect with @Welcome Change Media on LinkedIn.
You can also contact us via reframeofmind.com.au with your stories or suggestions for future topics.
We'd like to thank today's guests for sharing their personal stories and insights. And for more information on any of the subjects, guests or references used in this episode, please see our show notes or reframeofmind.com.au.
Reframe of Mind is a Welcome Change Media production.